Welcome to Two Docs Talk. I'm Rob, joined by my co-host, Abbass. Today we're going to tackle the massive subject of diet. This is one of the most important topics we cover on our channel. We'll talk about why do we eat, when to eat, and what's the best foods to eat and what should you avoid. As always, if you'd like to get the latest updates, videos, hit the subscribe button below. So I'm going to let Abbass kick this off by talking about what is diet and when should we be eating?
From the beginning of the mankind, the eating and diet has been for two purposes. One, for survival. Second, for socialization. We eat food to have an adequate nutrition for our life as well as preventive disease. So a good nutrition is very, very important. Also, any gathering that you go, whether it's a birthday, New Year's, or even any ceremonies, is always involved in the food. So diet is not only important for humans, also for almost all the mammalians as well as all other living species. So choosing the right diet is the most important things to do to preventive disease, survival, and enjoyment. How much to eat? An average adult should be eating about 2,000 calories per day. But however, that's depend on the geographic location, activity, and state of the illness. So if you're ill, you may need more nutrition to not only for sustain, to fight the inflammation as well as infection. And if you're doing lots of physical activity, the same time that you need to adjust your calorie intake based on your daily activity. When to eat? In my opinion, the most important meal of the day is breakfast, and we should eat with circadian rhythm. Mostly eat 8 hours from the time that we are awake and allow our body to rest at night, as that's where the repair takes place. So breakfast, lunch, and light dinner and taking adequate calorie is very, very important. With that, also, we need to keep in mind that we keep well hydration state, enough that our urinary output is clear. So again, depend on the geographic location and activity. Drink at least 72 ounces of water per day is very, very important.
Okay, well, I'm going to take a stab at what to eat, and this is a huge topic, and some of what I say is going to be controversial, so these are my opinions. One of my patients once described the body as a basically a big bioreactor, and I think that it makes a lot of sense. We put in food; those foods have energy, and we use that to fuel our body. Of course, there's all different types of macronutrients. The big three are protein, fat, and carbohydrates. There's been massive controversy over the last 50 years about what to eat, what should we be eating, what type of diet. Mediterranean diet, all sorts of other diets have come and gone over the years. I've come to the conclusion, this is my opinion, but diet is really, you should be eating to optimize metabolic health. And what I mean by that is making sure that your blood glucose, both your fasting glucose and something known as the hemoglobin A1C, are at normal levels. Ideally, hemoglobin A1C, probably optimal, is like 5.2, 5.3. Also, fasting insulin level. It's debated about what the ideal is, but less than 5 to 10 is probably an ideal fasting insulin level. Also, making sure your cardiac markers, cholesterol, lipids are optimized. But over the last 50 years, we have seen this massive explosion of diabetes and prediabetes. And basically, prediabetes is just diabetes, but it there's no clinical symptoms, or there's no end organ damage yet of the body. So, for example, pre-diabetics usually don't have kidney damage or eye disease or neuropathy, nerve damage from their high blood glucose. These two conditions are linked to insulin resistance. And in my opinion, we are eating as a country way more carbohydrate food with massively surging insulin levels that's leading to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. I'm particularly interested in, as you all know, in cancer prevention. And one of the best ways to prevent cancer is to optimize metabolic health. The food pyramid, as we'll show it here in the video, the published food pyramid has at the base, grains as a huge component. The problem is a lot of people are insulin resistant. So eating a diet heavy in grains and and carbs can be very, very bad if you're insulin resistant. So some individuals can eat a ton of carbs and not have a problem. Others are, eat a little bit of pasta and the glucose shoots up to 200, and that's indicative of insulin resistance. Some have advocated, I watched a video today by a gentleman named Dr. Perlmutter. 11 years ago, I think he's ahead of his time here, he published a video on YouTube. It's short, it's like 2 minutes long. We'll put it in the show notes, about inverting the food pyramid. So basically putting the things that are at the bottom, grains and starchy foods, and putting them to the top. So having a lot less of those foods in the diet and more protein and fats. Fats have largely been demonized. So we had a great interview with Johnny Bowden last year, talked about fat and cholesterol and fats. The most dangerous type of fat you must avoid is called trans fat. Those are in a lot of processed food like frozen pizzas, muffins, cookies, crackers. All these types of foods have some trans fats. The partially hydrogenated oils have been banned by the Food and Drug Administration. So you're not going to find those anymore. Those you cannot even buy. Those have been banned, I think, since 2020, 2021. Those are no longer in American foods, which is great. But derivatives of them are still in a lot of the snack foods and foods. So you can actually still have up to 0.5 gram of trans fats in a lot of foods. And if you're eating, chips, crackers, fried chips and all these other processed foods, you can still get a significant amount of trans fats. There's no health benefit whatsoever from trans fats, and they are associated with heart disease. And they have shocking they were not removed earlier from the American diet. I wanted Abbass to comment a little bit about diet variability because there's such a massive. You look around the world, and humans eat literally from A to Z in terms of the different types of diets. So it's just amazing how folks in different, as you mentioned, different climates, different parts of the world have markedly different diets, yet they're all very healthy.
I think the key things about the diet, we need to eat real food. As soon as we package the food or we process it, then we have to do additive and preservative for shelf life. And that's, I think, one of the biggest carcinogen as well as cause of inflammation. I think if you eat real food as we are intended to, and what nature is given to us, I think we're going to stay healthy. Of course, the balance, another thing is important, that between the proteins and carbohydrates and other things, it should be varies. For example, during the winter and cold weather, we need more protein, more fat to be able to survive and produce more energy, while during the summer times and spring times, probably we should eat something that keep our body much cooler, as more vegetables, more fruits. And with that also, you need to be careful what you're eating and how you're eating. So the food is not only just you sit down and eat it, it's the process of you picking it, you clean it, you cook it. So these are all the cephalic phase of eating. But by doing those, your body get prepared how to eat, and then taking time for eating, not eating from the window or in the car, sitting down and enjoy the meals. That's another thing that helps you to be, have less gastroesophageal reflux, less bloatiness, and avoiding as Rob mentioned, a lot of these sugary, um, um, what's that, drinks, and if you go outside, the three best friends of the chef is salt, sugar, and granulated fat. That's why the food outside tastes good, but as well as they put additives for the taste enhancing. For example, if you open a bag of Dorito and it's chips, if you make it at home, you may get a few and you get satisfied. But however, when you open one of those things, because of this taste enhancing, you can eat the whole bag and without um, you feel that was not your intent. So the food industry has learned that from that, and that they would add that to many of the food that we are. Even in the, for example, vegan diet, was reading from a company that says you just give me what you like and I'll make it taste like it is. Whether you want to taste like beef, chicken, or anything else, they can give it to them. Any, whether you give them tofu or any carbohydrates, then they can add flavoring to it. And when you eat it, it is be close to what you ask for. So choosing how you eat, when you eat, and definitely avoiding the processed food and packaged food, I think, is the key things for healthy living.
We'll take a few minutes here to talk about things to avoid. This is not a complete list, but we're going to hit on the main ones. The big one is sugar. So sugar is a toxin. You should not be eating any added sugar in your diet, period. Sugar and fruit I think is maybe okay if you're insulin sensitive. If you're insulin resistant, you got to be really careful about eating, especially sugary fruit like mangoes. And for this, you can buy a continuous glucose monitor, CGM, slap that on your arm or abdomen, and you can measure what actually happens to your blood glucose when you eat that. Eat a few slices of mango. 30 minutes later, you'll see the blood glucose go up, and you can then track how how sensitive you are to certain foods in terms of the glucose spike. Sugar has many different names. I put a few here, and this is all marketing. It's all the same stuff: agave, corn syrup, honey, brown sugar, cane sugar, molasses, beet sugar. The high fructose corn syrup is particularly bad. We did a couple episodes on sugar about 2 years ago, and we talked about high fructose corn syrup. The reason that one is so bad is because that has to be processed by the liver, broken down into glucose. Only the liver can process the fructose in high fructose corn syrup, and that's probably one of the big contributors to fatty liver disease, because what happens is the liver gets all this excess glucose after it breaks down the fructose, and the muscle can't take it, the other organs can't take it, so the liver says, okay, I guess I'm gonna take it, and it ends up turning that glucose into triglyceride and then into fat, and then voila, fatty liver disease, which is actually a huge risk factor, as we talked about in our liver disease episode with Dr. Cesario, for cirrhosis and cancer of the liver. The other one I want to talk about is the seed oils. Now, this is controversial. Seed oils, the data is, of course, conflicting. Like most studies on food, it's so hard to isolate that specific food group and try to figure out if that is healthy for humans or not. However, there has been a massive increase in seed oil consumption in the United States over the last 40 years. In the 1970s, we had the advent of what's called canola oil, which is a derivative of rapeseed oil. This was originally used as an industrial lubricant. I was just reading about this. It had too much of this, it's called ureic acid. It had too much of that acid, which is toxic. And so you can't eat rapeseed oil, you'll get sick. But so they figured out a way, the Canadians figured out a way to purify or change chemically the rapeseed oil, and made what's called canola oil, which has a lower amount of this ureic acid and is considered as safe. It's one of the generally regarded as safe type foods, but I have serious questions about canola oil and the other seed oils. They are loaded with omega-6 fatty acids, which we know to be inflammatory. I suspect they're in the background contributing to poor health. They're probably promoting diabetes, heart disease, and a bunch of other conditions. So using non-seed oil, so olive oil, avocado oil is okay. Even in my opinion, butter and lard are probably are safer alternatives than canola oil. Um, so yeah, the fats have largely been demonized, but it's interesting, demonized the saturated fat, but then brought in these other oils into our diet, such as canola, which are, in my opinion, not healthy. The other couple I wanted to talk about are artificial sweeteners. These were marketed, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s as great options. They're no or low calorie foods, but the problem is, although these sugars are not absorbed, when you eat these kind of foods like sugary drinks or sugary foods, your microbiome is still seeing the bacteria in your gut are still seeing these as sugar, and so there's a lot of communication that happens when you eat sugary foods. Your body wants to crave sweet, and so there's likely a link between these diet and artificial sweeteners and diabetes. It's probably not those specific substances, but it's probably the microbiome signaling that's leading to poor health. And the other one, if you've heard me say this before, but I have a real pet peeve about the plant-based milks. They're sold as these healthy foods, but if you look at especially the plant-based like oat milk, that's not the low sugar variety, just the regular one, or there's also flavored ones that have almond milk. There's all sorts of different plant-based milks. They have so much added sugar. It's almost as much as drinking soda. So the addition of sugar in these products, and also dairy products too, Go-Gurt and all these other yogurts are just spiked with sugar. Breakfast has become just a candy, eating all these different sugary foods. And we've got to be really careful, because this is very likely contributing to massive insulin resistance. And we talked about prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes in the US and worldwide.
Yeah, I want to make a few comments on that. Number one, if you go back to our episode on sugar, in 16, 1700s, I think the American per household, they were eating about 2 pounds of sugar. Today, average American is 152 to 154 pounds of sugar. And this is all what Rob mentioned. On the vegetable and fruits, and I think it's very, very important we eat 5 servings of the fruits. I think they decrease the inflammation. I think it's good for all the nutrients we need, for vitamins. And of course, we had an episode on this, how you eat your fruits, as well as the fruits mostly, whether a little bit in a less ripe to fully ripe, the amount of sugar totally changes on those. So you need to be cautious, if you're pre-diabetic, to do that. But still, I think is eating the natural is better than the artificial. And on the substitute sugar, is not only it's not good for you. I think is one of the number one killer of the microbiome in the gut. I think this is like as bad as or close to antibiotic, because one day there was that all this bacteria and fungi in our guts consume that. Number one of my patients commonly is they produce a lot of gas and bloatiness with this sugar. That I think there was a substitute olestra. I think came for fat to do the same thing. It was so gas for me and so much abdominal bloatiness and pain, so it went off of the market. So these things, I think the microbiome in our gut is the key thing for our health, and that shows as sort of what goes in and what's for inflammation, longevity, and I think these things that really to avoid them at any cost is the best thing to do. So I think choosing real food eat in your own kitchen. I tell my patient the more time you spend in your kitchen, the less in doctor's office, and the more avoiding the packaged food, the fast food, and all of this thing too. And majority of this food industry to want to make sure that number one, the foods per se doesn't have any E. coli, so they overcook or things then because they want to keep the half shelf. Or secondly, is just majority of the I think they want to have the big half shelf. That's why lots of good nutrient out of these things are gone, and they forfeit or add this nutrition to it, which is not as good as what nature give it to us. So you have to be reasonable, and regardless of where you are in the world and what type of diet you eat, you need to keep this basic concept and to see on your activity. I tell my patient, have a choice of diet when you're working Monday to Friday, whatever days you work, then have a maybe a little liberated when you're not stressed out at home. So this is all an art and balance that everybody should be investing sometimes into it.
There's a really good book I thought I'd mention. It's called Salt, Sugar, and Fat by Michael Moss, and it talks about a lot of the things we talked about with the food industry and how these processed foods were marketed largely as for convenience throughout the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. But some of the stories, my jaw was just dropped as I was driving, listening to these stories about. And I think we should do an episode on this, because I think this is a really good book to talk about the food industry and what they're doing. We'll learn about all the things like called the bliss factor, where the amount of sweetness is just so overwhelming that you can't resist. It's higher. The bliss factor is higher in kids, so kids want to eat a much more sugary, sweet food than adults. How soda is formulated just perfectly to activate that bliss factor, but it's not too sweet, so you keep coming back for more. And there's all sorts of different manipulations have been done in the food sciences, and some of these things I think are really some of these foods have just been so ingrained in American culture, like Kool-Aid and Tang and all this food. They're so heavily marketed, but there's actually no, like, Tang is not food. There's no actual nutritive value in that, and how it was sold and marketed in the U.S. is just, it's a great example of food science and marketing, and how we all need to learn about this and recognize that those foods are making us sick. So, as always, if you like our videos, hit the like, hit the subscribe button below. You'll get the latest. We'll have lots more. We'll be doing several episodes this month about diets and metabolic health. Abbass, do you have any other comments?
Just the sugar is the most addictive substance throughout the whole world, and I think the food industry has recognized that, and just we're just following, just like a laboratory rat following them. So we need just waking up and make the right choices. So this we have decreased inflammation, less disease, and live a healthier and daily life better. So thank you for listening, and please send us any comment if you have, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.